Well, good morning. Welcome to another day of landscape painting here in Vermont. As you can see, it's a beautiful day. There's my subject. This is my studio up there. I wanted to get a composition that showed off this beautiful barn. And I have slightly altered this landscape as though I were setting up a still life, so to speak. All the potted flowers that you see out here and that clothesline were all rigged by me to add a little extra color and little notes of composition to the painting. Now, this canvas, I've prepared it beforehand. This is a very smooth canvas. It's a white lead coated linen, and I've put a sort of what we used to call a turpentine wash. We don't use turpentine anymore. It's actually a mineral spirit wash. But to show you how little paint is on here, I did this about 20 minutes ago, and you can actually wipe it off with a dry paper towel. That's how I take it off. And again, this is how, using paper towels, I can put it back on again very simply. And by the way, this canvas is just taped to a piece of masonite. I have clear tape this time instead of the darker brown tape. The tape wipes off very easily. Gives me a nice white border. Most often, I use the tone to establish my harmony. And as I'm looking at this subject here, what I'm seeing is definitely a green harmony. So I'm going to put a little bit more green in here just to help me alone. It's like when they're tuning up the choir, somebody blows on a little whistle to get the right note. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm getting the right note on my canvas in the beginning. And this tells me what family of color I want to stick to throughout the painting. Before I start painting on this, I want to say just something about these brushes. See how beautifully shaped they are. Look at how it tapers to a perfect point. Now that brush will do anything. When I wash my brushes, and while the bristles are still wet, I just take a little piece of cardboard. It's not very thick, very little thin little piece of cardboard, see? I put the wet brush in there, do that, and then clamp it and let it dry overnight. Next morning when I come out, that edge, look at that edge, how beautiful it is. It's razor sharp, perfectly flat. That brush will do anything I want it to do. It's a lot more work to wash your brushes like that, but it's worth it when you start painting, which is what I'm going to do right now. Now, since the barn is the dominant element in this composition, I'm going to start with that red. There we are. Maybe bring it over just a little bit farther. I'm really just composing things right now. A bit of Terra Rosa here will do. I can see the painting in my head. It's just a matter of sticking it on my canvas so everything will fit the way I want it to. All right, now these are the brushes I'm going to be using now. These bristles were good for the block in here, just the approximation, but now I'm going into precise drawing. I'm going to get serious now, so to speak, and I'm using these Langnickels, which I can shape perfectly for precision drawing. I'm laying in an approximate color here right now. There are a lot of different colors up there. The shadows are going to change rapidly as we approach noontime. The shapes of the darks are what are going to change the most. So I want to get them in right now and leave them. I'm not going to chase them around. So here we go. Because it is so bright out here, the colors I'm mixing right now are probably going to appear a little darker when I get into the studio than they appear to me as I'm painting them right now. There we go. This is just measuring things very carefully. I want to get something down that I can depend upon. A little cadmium red and a touch of Terra Rosa. I'm going to get this line is the key line. Got to get that just as straight as an arrow. Okay. I'm going to use my trusty palette knife to really get that line straight. I want a nice sharp edge on it. This is one of the key edges in the picture. All right, you get the hand nice and steady. Lay that knife down there. Ooh, there it goes. Ah, perfect. Well, not exactly perfect. There. Getting the drawing, getting the drawing. That's the important thing, right? Now at the beginning, get it right. Notice here that the colors on my painting seem much more brilliant than the shots of the barn. That's because I'm seeing more color than a video camera can see. The shots of the barn look cooler and less saturated because they're so far away. I think the colors that I use are much more accurate than a camera can capture. Now the sun is very bright right now. Now for the preliminary dark values I need before I put on the background tree colors. Now it looks like I'm using a lot of paint here, but I'm really not. It's going on rather like dry brushing. There we are. Later on, when I know where everything goes and I'm got all my crucial drawing elements in there, then I can start laying the paint on. But right now, at this stage, I don't like a lot of heavy paint on. I like to maintain control of the canvas. Paint is at its best, at its most controllable, and the consistency that it comes from the paint tube as the manufacturer made it. And the other thing about control, as far as the manipulation of the paint is concerned, is that a brush with very stiff bristles is harder to control than a slightly softer brush. And a brush that is too soft does not control the paint as well either, because it doesn't have the strength to hold the oil paint, make it go where you want it to go. That's why these Langnickels are ideal. This brush, however, is not a Langnickel, it's a bristle brush. Now for some careful painting to indicate just how that barn is sitting on the hill. I want to get a nice sharp edge on that brush. There we are. Okay. Bam. Now we go down to here. Get the top of that little roof there. Then we go down to there. Get the bottom side of that. That's the shadow on that side. And then we get the shadow on this side. Sometimes I carry a small level in my paint box to make sure that, that my canvas is level to begin with. At least I know that that is a reference point that I can depend upon. That looks pretty level. Not pretty level, it's got to be exactly level. Well, it's about 11 in the morning now, and these shadows are really starting to change. So I'd better nail them down while I still can. And this is one of the challenges of sunlight painting, that things do change. Everything, though, doesn't change at the same rate. The trick is telling which ones move fast and which ones move slowly. Cast shadows change very fast. Flat things like fields and distant shapes change much more slowly. So my plan is always to paint the fast-changing things first. I also try to figure out at the beginning just how much time I will have before the scene changes too much to continue painting. Now it's time to start laying in some color throughout the painting and then get back to drawing. Just so we kind of get in the color mood of this whole thing. I'm just laying this in as a note of color without too much thought as to the drawing. And the somewhat brighter color in the foreground here. There we go. this is giving me a nice feel of the color mood of the whole painting once I get these values in over on this side. I'm using the same palette that I always use, whether I'm indoors or outdoors. I don't add anything to the palette. The only difference is that when I'm landscape painting, I tend to use more of this lemon yellow and the cadmium yellow than I would normally use indoors. When I'm indoors, usually painting under north daylight, and there's not a lot of green foliage indoors, so I don't normally see a great deal of yellow-green, this cool yellow-green that you get when you mix lemon yellow with Viridian. You don't see that indoors very often, except occasionally in a still life. With this one green, with this Viridian and the two blues and the variety of yellows that I have, I can mix just about any green that I want. One of the most familiar complaints about landscape painting in the summertime is that everything is too green, or everything is just green, or there are too many leaves, something. But it all centers on the idea that everything is green, 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 green. But there are so many beautiful greens. Greens that don't even look like green. Greens that are altered by the colors that are next to them. Nature gives us such an abundance of colors. Oh, that wonderful breeze is coming up. Keeping the black flies, Vermont's famous black flies, away from us today. Even though I am thoroughly, at this moment, thoroughly sprayed down with insect repellent. The little devils can't stand up to the wind. Well, neither can I. Wind is not good for landscape painters, but this is just a little breeze. It's perfect for today. There we go. Watch this. Oh, I love to do this. Oh, perfect. Now, it's important to line this side up with this side. Notice how careful I am before I commit myself. I'll make sure this is in the right place, because I like to make just the right stroke when I get over on this side. This is where the barn roof comes in over here. Whenever there's symmetry, when you paint one thing, you paint the other on the other side. You keep matching them up as you go along, making sure that they measure up so that alignment is just so. So frustrating to put on some beautiful color and then find out you've stuck it in the wrong place. I've done that plenty of times in the past, so I'm really shy about letting that happen now. Lay that on carefully from the top down. There. That one. I want this to look nice and loose, but still be well drawn. Looked like it was painted. not copied from a photograph. All right, now, let's see, the windows are just about directly above these points and halfway between that line. If I were to run this line straight through here, the window would bisect it right there. And one, and here's the other guy. And then we have a little thing right there, the air conditioning unit. An air-conditioned barn, how about that? Now, windows. The camera angle might make some of these views of my painting slightly distorted, but my lines really are true here. I always make especially sure of that when I'm painting windows. I love to take liberties with them too, because sometimes, like in this new barn, they can be very boring, so I'm jazzing them up a bit. You know, give them some more character. Some of this brushwork is my underpainting, the darks that I need under the greens. I'll paint on top of these darks. Now, since the sun is going to move so rapidly, I have to get my wonderful clothesline in there before the sun is gone from that side of the building. I went to such trouble to set that up. But I don't want to draw attention to that side, but I do need some interest over there. Isn't it amazing what you can do with a knife? This is magic. This is magic. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Make a mistake, just scrape it off. That's the beauty of oil paint. Just scrape it off like it never happened. Oil paint is user-friendly. just have to know how to do it. These things on the clothesline are shifting in the wind. I want to get that little feel of the wind out here, that little breeze. And we don't want to overwork it. Overworking is what takes the life out of a painting. Less is better. Less brushwork. Think carefully about where you want to put your brushwork and do it simply, deliberately. As few strokes as possible. Not to be cute about it, but to make things look strong and bold and nice and clean looking. There's a typical brush stroke. Every brush stroke has a top and a bottom and a left side and a right side. And rarely are all those sides perfect in one stroke. It usually has to be modified with another stroke. One side has to be softened, or one side has to be sharpened, or a little color added, or something. And that's particularly true of the knife stroke. And we're going to get into that. Let me just cover all that up and get rid of it. There we are. User-friendly. Oil paint may be user-friendly, but nature is unforgiving. Nature marches on. Nature doesn't care whether I finish this painting or not. The sun will go down no matter what I do today. Now, as you can see, when I started out an hour ago, the shadow on this door down here was way up here. Now it's way down here. Now I'm not going to chase it around, but I do have to finish off this face of the barn, because in 25 minutes or so, this whole thing is going to be in shadow. If I know this is not going to change, this is not going to change, and this is not going to change, but this is right in there. So, first I'm going to add some colors to it. This really is very bright sunlight today. Gotta get the shadow under this. There we are. Now for a few touches with my magic painting knife. There and there. Here goes more of the final dark values. I need them here before I lay in that stuff in front of the carport. I always have to keep in mind how very bright this sun is. This brightness is actually closing down the pupils of my eyes, and that's making me see less color. And that's because less light is reaching my retinas. I really should have my big umbrella out here, because it helps me see color much better by cutting down that brightness. But I forgot to bring my umbrella today, and that's one of the ways of landscape painting. There's always some problem other than just sticking the paint in the right place. I'm not too worried though. I know when I see this later in my studio under normal light, it'll probably look better to me than it does now. It'll look deeper and richer in tone because this brightness out here is causing me to mix my colors slightly darker and more saturated than I realize. Our tendency to deviate from straight lines is so strong that it really takes a concentrated effort to stay accurate. And anytime I think about it consciously, I try to do it. Okay, now for some cadmium yellow and viridian for that grass and foliage in front of the carport. Little greens. That's what I'm going after now. And the shadows on the cupola there. That cupola used to be on top of the barn. Now it's just a decoration on the ground. Getting close to the end now. Now I need a real ragged brush. There we are. This is an old, worn-out Langnickel brush. There's only about 5 hairs left on it. I need some more darks here too. Sort of sculpt my greens, give them some better shape. Ah, there's my clothesline. This is what I've really been waiting for. I've got to start on that sheet, but now I get to put in more of the color. First, that red, my, cadmium red, right out of the tube. This is like eating candy. I need to hit that bottom edge here and there. Ah, put in some pure white here. Just so we think the lady who did the wash only didn't do 3 things. There. I need just a couple of touches to clean up these edges. There. Okay, here goes the rest of the trees and stuff. I'm really going to have to hustle now. The light is changing very fast, but I've got to watch it though. Don't rush. I want this loose but not sloppy. Like I said in my book, looseness should be what a painting looks like, not necessarily how it was done. Sargent's looseness was achieved very carefully. I'm not so sure about Sorolla, though. His students said he painted like a pig eats. But he was obviously always in complete control. Luck is a wonderful thing, too. You know, all those wonderful little pots and flowers are all going to be painted now. Little dabs of color. How grateful we should be to the Impressionists for inventing this wonderful way to put paint on, little dibs and dabs. You should never get closer than about 8 feet to an impressionistic painting. That's when it all comes together. All those little colors and values. Things make sense. There. Ah, perfect. It helps not to mix it too thoroughly so that the paint itself is variegated. So when it goes on, especially on a small painting like this, a little area of color can take on such meaning. This is the good part. This is the good part. We're just adding a lot of nice color. I make a big deal in my book about starting a painting, how important the first strokes are. And I never did mention how important the last strokes are, because it is remarkably easy to mess up a painting at the last minute. What I'm going to do right now, I want this brushstroke to look like a tree trunk with sunlight on it. Just see how just a little thing like that will do it. Painting is magical. Great stuff. Now, ready for the foreground. We're starting to get some foreground shadows, which are going to be helpful. This is called finger painting. I learned this when I was about 6 years old. The bottom of the doorways picked up some of that color from the gravel of the driveway. So this is what we have now. That's just what I wanted. Oh, there we are. Good. A few more minutes now. Here comes the sun again. Good. Just a bit of white and cadmium yellow deep here. This may look like I'm just making all this up, but I'm not. It's really out there, and I'm trying to get the effect of it. Dead grass on top of green grass. Now for that flower pot in front of the barn. This is true Impressionism now. I like to alternate between my knife and the brush. Mixing with the knife keeps my colors nice and clean. They're all mixtures of the cadmiums, lemon yellow and viridian. Ah, my ragged brush again. I could spend another week on this painting, but Mother Nature is altering the light right now. So anything I do beyond what I'm going to do in the next 2 minutes would be faking it, and I don't want to do that. That's not why I'm out here. Yeah, that viridian right there, that's much too raw, much too raw. That has to be warmed up. Otherwise, it'll bother me every time I look at it. That looks better. Ah, much better. You see how much better that looks? So that's it. That's it for today. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And thank you for joining me. Welcome back to our little adventure in landscape painting. As you can see, we're not in the landscape anymore. We're in my studio. And actually, we're right up here in my barn, right behind this easterly wall. While I was painting this in the morning, I had a few observers, artists, who were watching me paint, and they came up with some rather interesting questions. And what I'd like to do now is first go into some of their questions. The first question was about why did I choose to paint this painting? Why did I pick this out from this huge, complicated landscape that is available to me here in Vermont? Why did it appeal to me? The color, for one thing, the drama of red against green, the complementary colors, butting heads, so to speak. It gives a dramatic effect. Always when I am painting, I'm never making a picture. I'm not conscious of creating a painting. I am conscious of trying to capture something the way a hunter would capture something or a trapper would capture something. It's always the moment. And this day, with this color, with this contrast and of complementary colors and all the beautiful little impressionistic things happening around the broad, flat areas, the light was the dominant factor that produced the color. And so that's what I was after. That's why I painted what I did paint. I've employed many different types of painting, you might say schools of painting, in this one painting. If we can look very closely at some of these areas, like this area here, this is what is called broken color, separated. See? That's pure impressionism. If we pull back and see a large flat area like this, we see that it's not so impressionistic, that the color is not broken up, that the strokes are broad, so that painting in this area, and here all belong to a kind of painting technique that you might call the school of brushing, where broad brushwork and things that involve dry brushwork are part of the technique. I also used a lot of knife painting in this picture, probably more knife painting than I normally do in a painting. So I used this particular knife. You can see how I laid it in here, and if you remember that broad stroke that went down this way, I was using the knife in here, there, underneath here. I used the knife just a little bit over here. I used it to apply things there. So I was working my way both this way across the painting and then up this way. I particularly used the knife right on this edge several times, and then I finally put a final stroke right there. And Nancy watched me do this, and she said, that was the stroke that made the painting right there. That was my focal point. This line of the building, because that was a question that people were asking me about. The focal point is the point you want to make. Like in conversation, it's the thing that you're talking about. And the thing to which all else is simply background, or that it's something in addition to. It's the main thing you want to say in this field of view. And for me, the main thing I wanted to say is what is happening in this particular area here. That's how I established my focal point. And even though this is the lightest light, This area still remains the area of greatest activity. There's more color and more funny little edges and more contrast than anywhere else in the picture. And I don't know about you, but my eye keeps going around the painting, but it always comes back to there. You know, when I look at this painting now, I linger here and I like what's going on over here in this little structure, and I like what's going on here. But I always come back to this. When I was younger, and this is a true confession, I would have been tempted to put a figure in here, a cheap trick in order to put your eye in there. I would always be tempted to find something, some device to draw the eye there, rather than find something that was actually there and just bring it out, to be conscious of my own attention, find the edges and the contrast and the color, to rivet the eye to that thing. Because very often a focal point can be something that's very subtle. It doesn't have to be very striking. It can be something extremely subtle, like a silent moment in a concert. That pause where there's no sound whatsoever, that can be a focal point too. And it has been a very effective focal point. Another question that I get frequently about working from life is all about color harmony. How do you get the color of the light? How do you mix the paint to match that color? There are a lot of things that can help you get there, help you make the right mixtures, help you make the right decisions, and help you make the right judgments that lead to the right decisions and therefore to the right mixtures, and then therefore to put them in the right place in relationship to one another. One thing is just knowing what the light is. For example, yesterday, the overriding thing was that we were in bright, brilliant sunlight. We know that it's a light that has very high contrast. That is to say, it produces brilliant lights and equally complementary darks. And that the darks are going to be cool colors. For example, the red building is going to produce dark reds that are cooler rather than warmer. If this were a Northlight painting or any kind of a cool light painting, the part that is on the dark side would be warmer than the part that's on the light side. And all my mixtures in cool light would contain elements of blue or green, and these would contain less blue and green. Yesterday it was just the opposite. All of the colors in the reds on the light side of the barn contained cadmium red, cadmium orange, yellow ochre, lemon yellow, cadmium yellow, and so on, in very small amounts of the cool colors on the palette, such as ultramarine blue or viridian. Another great aid, if I may move this over, I'm going to show you something which I did for years and years, and in fact I'm still doing. It's my old standby that I learned in art school. It has never failed to tell me where I am when I'm dealing with color, and that's the color charts. These color charts were always part of my painting routine. I always had them with me, and the way I used them was to hold them up against my subject, against my scene, or against the model that I was working with, or against my still life. Hold up this chart and say, is what I'm looking at, is this the family of color that it belongs to? Or, okay, is it this chart? Is this the chart? Let me hold them up. Is this the chart? Hey, part of it, right? This is part of the chart. And I can tell, for example, that the reds on this chart are a little too cool for the overall color of the reds in this painting. But a lot of these greens are part of this painting. So I know that this is part of my harmony. Is this the color harmony? Obviously it isn't. This doesn't look anything like the painting, so we don't have to worry about that. This is not an ultramarine blue harmony. Is it a Viridian harmony? This is the Viridian chart. This is Viridian as it comes from the tube. A little white added, a little more white added, a little bit more, and then just off-white. Then as we go across here, this is Viridian with cadmium yellow, and then yellow ochre, and so on through cadmium orange. Viridian with terra rosa and alizarin crimson, and so on. So it's not that chart. This is the cobalt blue chart. Not that one, right? It gets easy when you do it this way, because this is all visual. See, now on this chart, a lot of the colors I'm using in the shadows belong up in this row up in here. See, this chart is the transparent oxide red chart. This is transparent oxide red as it comes out of the tube, and transparent oxide red mixed as we go along here with cadmium yellow, and then cadmium yellow deep, and yellow ochre, and cadmium red, and alizarin crimson, and so on through the blues. So a lot of these mixtures, these cool reds with the transparent oxide red, are in my shadows. So this is the chart is telling me what to mix. Okay? And now we come to the cadmium red chart, and we see that, yes, indeed, a lot of these colors, here we go. Cadmium red chart, cadmium red with cadmium orange, cadmium red with cadmium yellow, and so on. So I have found out that the colors in the cadmium red chart, the colors in the cadmium yellow deep chart, the colors in the cadmium yellow charts, and yellow ochre, and alizarin crimson chart are going to paint this painting. Not that the other colors aren't in there, because there are blues, but this is the predominant harmony. Before we leave the subject of color harmony, I'd like to put a little sketch up here on the easel. Actually, it was just as the buds were coming out on the trees, that wonderful springtime delicacy. This is about this other wonderful device for establishing, once you recognize the color harmony that's out there, and this one was easy. I mean, you could see, all you got to do is hold up the chart. Let's see, we pick out this guy here. There it is. There's that color harmony. You could hold this up to the scene, to the barn itself, to the grass, to whatever, and say, those are the colors. And I can go through my charts here, and I can go to this one. I'm saying, oh, there is the color I need for that, and here's the color I need for the side of the barn. I made all of this easier for myself by having recognized the outdoor harmony, recognized what colors I needed for the harmony, recognized it in the scene, and then I put this wash here. This is the wash I put on here, and I varied it a little bit. Here's the original wash. It's just mineral spirits with a little Viridian, a little yellow ochre, and maybe a touch of transparent oxide red, which is actually brown in my thinking. And you can see the transparent oxide red showing all through here, and you can see it coming out here. But this is just this little sheen of green all through the painting, showing through everywhere, has a unifying effect. For example, all of these colors that show through in the background, which appear as the background now, are all the original wash showing through each brush stroke, and it has this wonderful unifying effect. You see the wash showing through here and up in here. You see the wash showing through here and here and here and here, up in here. As I march across the painting, it's almost too small to see, but it's there. It's there like little pixels on a monitor, on a television monitor. All that green as we march across the painting. It's like the tonic note in Beethoven or Bach or something. It's like C major coming through. But it's a dominant note that repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself and influences all of the other colors, even though none of the colors that I have in here are actually green in themselves. This, for example, is a wash. If you can see this closely, these are washes that go up and down that form the side of this barn. This is cobalt blue and yellow ochre, and this is cobalt blue and transparent oxide red. This is the same thing with a little more transparent oxide red predominating. This is ultramarine blue. This one here is ultramarine blue with a little bit of terra rosa in it. Same thing over here, a little terra rosa with ultramarine blue, and then we get into slightly more terra rosa in the mixtures. That green comes through. See, it's coming through here and here and here. It's repeating itself over and over again. And that's why a snowfall, when snow is coming down, or fog, or any kind of misty scene, has a very harmonious effect, because those little particles in the landscape are creating that unifying factor. So these are my little friends, and I still keep them with me when I go out landscape painting. And they tell me what colors to mix. It's as simple as that. Oh, but there's one more thing. I'm always asked about straight lines when we're doing, especially in landscape painting. People have to paint buildings and fences, and especially when the landscape is a city landscape with modern buildings. The question is, how do you make straight lines interesting? And let me talk about that a little bit here, because I think in this painting that I've taken a lot of straight lines on this old barn and this house, and I have made them interesting. It's not so much the way the lines actually appear in my subject, but how I put the paint down, okay? And by the way, that's the key to a lot of what makes painting so compelling, is that it's not the subject, it's how we see the subject and how we express the subject. And that's what I want to show you now. So let me put a fresh canvas up here and we'll play with the knife and the brush a little bit. Let me show you a few things with the brush that I've noticed with some of the, let's say, newer painters that I've worked with, and some of the professionals too. It has to do with straight lines. How do you handle them? Let's say we have a line that goes like that, and we have a structure like that. Now let's see, already it's picking up some of the turpentine. It's still a straight line, but now we're softening it. So we're gonna get an instant replay of how I started that last painting. This is Viridian and a little bit of transparent oxide red. And this is cobalt blue with a little bit of terra rosa in it. We're going to go back and forth. Let's say this is an old weathered barn. This is going to be about how you can achieve interesting effects involving straight lines through the use of edges, and how to apply the paint to achieve interesting edges. So I'm just laying the groundwork, so to speak, for the barn, laying the foundation of it. And let's say that there was some grass, nice green grass around the barn. I'm mixing a little bit of yellow ochre with Viridian here, and let's say that barn is sitting there like that. And that we had some, maybe some green and stuff in the background here, like in that other painting. Background stuff. Okay, trees growing back there. Wiping it off with my favorite Viva towels. And let's put a roof on it too, so we can start going into edges, and then we'll play with the knife a little bit. Let's give it a red roof, okay? This, again, still transparent paint. This is a lot of terra rosa and just a touch of cobalt blue, and then we'll do the face of this barn in sort of a gray. This is typical of how I will start a painting, by the way, and this I'm just making up in my head. So we're going to do that. That'll be one side of the barn. Give it a little bit more texture like that. That guy's sitting there like that. And then maybe a little bit more background green, a little more viridian with yellow ochre behind it. Okay, there we are. When I try to get an interesting line, I try to get as many different ways to put the paint on as I can. It's sort of a delight for the eye, little variations on how the paint gets on from here onto the canvas. Now, in order to do this, I need to know how much paint is on my knife and where it is. Okay? 'Cause otherwise, I can't predict where it's going to go. So I know that this is going to be, that's as far as the paint goes on the blade. From there, almost to the tip, it's just about a 1/16 of an inch less. And I want to make sure that I know how much is on the exact edge. So I do that, wipe it off. And then I know pretty much that the stroke is going to start there and I can go downward with that guy. See, I knew that was going to happen. And that's a certain amount of predictability. Now, it's rare. It's rare that you can do a stroke like that twice in a row because I've used up the paint that was already there. So I got to reload my brush and do it again. You can't go like that and then do that and then do that and do that because the second stroke, you don't know how much paint is left on the knife. Let me pick up the same amount of paint here as I did before. That's about it. Okay, there we go. Oh, perfect. I'm not worried about the bottom edge yet. I'm just worried about creating that top edge, getting that straight. And I'm gonna mess up that straight line just a little bit after we get to the edge here. All right. There. In order to create edges that are similar to the painting I showed you just a few minutes ago, I can create an edge going this way, or I can use a brush. Here we go. We can do a real soft edge like that. See how soft that is? Now, we can do it with a wet edge, and you can only do one stroke with this. You can wet just the tip of this brush, just barely, and maybe put a little bit more of the cobalt blue on there because a clean brush with just a little bit of mineral spirits on it is going to remove any wet paint, any thin wet paint that's on there. So let me load this with a little bit of the paint that's already on there and show you what it looks like when you work into a dark and then draw it downwards. Watch. And we do it slowly so we can see. See, look at now. That creates, up close, just a fascinating sort of edge that is quite different in character from that one. Okay, okay, now we want to draw that down all the way to the bottom here. Okay, keep going, keep going. See how slowly I'm going? Oh, that's perfect. That looks like an old weathered barn. See, look at that. Isn't that nice? I'll show you another way to create an edge, and that is by actually mixing a color that is halfway between this one and this one. I'll show you on the side here what an incremental edge is. Let's say we have an orange color over here, like in a still life. Let's say we have an orange sitting there like this. And there is a dark background. I'm mixing ultramarine blue with transparent oxide red. Okay. Now let's say I have a real soft edge right there, right on that edge right there, and I need to do it. So an incremental steps, little steps of color going from that orange to black. Now this is what the Impressionists loved to do. They would create an edge like that. Then if the edge is getting cooler, they would mix a cooler red into it, and they would have a little bit more slightly darker red on that edge. And they would keep adding colors until they reached the very edge of the edge. And that's how they got such a brilliant effect on their edges, all right? This is the kind of stuff that Monet and the boys loved, okay? Now, how would Sargent paint that, or Zorn, or Sorolla? All three of those guys are what I call brush men who used not fancy, but let's say fluid brushwork in order to create their edges. So let's say they had the same orange sitting there like that, and they wanted to create a nice soft edge so that that orange was turning like that, okay? This is how they would do it. They'd mix that orange color, and then they would take that dark color for the edge, and they would create this softness in one stroke like that. Well, maybe they do 2 strokes. I'm not as good as they were, so I have to do it in 2 strokes. That's how they would do it. Instead of mixing all those separate colors, then they would cut into it with their background color, like that. See? Now the pointillist boys would do it. You know who the pointillist guys were? They would do it with little little dots of color. See, the salon painters, now they were really something. Let's say they had their orange down here, and they would put their dark background into it, like this, okay? That's their orange. Let's say they wanted to create that soft edge. They would just sort of touch it lightly and go around the whole thing. See, what they're doing actually is picking up little tiny bits of color right on the tips of the brush, and they're putting it on the canvas like that. They're going like this, boom, and they're, in this case, they're picking up the dark on this end of the brush, and they're picking up the orange at the end of the brush, and they're twisting it slightly so that each time they pick up orange here and the black here, they twist it, they're turning it slightly, and they're drawing some of the color on this side into that side. It's the same thing that Sargent and the guys did in one stroke here, and it's the same, it ends up the same thing as the Impressionists did by mixing 9 different colors, see? And they did it like this. They pecked it to death. I mean, they would do this over and over and over again until the transition was so smooth, you just couldn't tell. See? Anyway, you see the point of creating edges. There's many, many different ways to do it. So I don't want my paintings to look like any particular school of painting. So I'm going to wipe this off because this orange and black is driving me nuts here. It looks like Halloween. And get back to the fun part of painting the barn here, where I'm changing the way I'm putting the paint on as it is appropriate to my subject. And I can mix a color now, as the Impressionists would do, can mix into that color and gradually make my paint lighter and lighter until I am into the color of the side of the barn. That's how we make the bottom edge a little bit more interesting. And how about the top edge? Top edge could be interesting too. For example, you can take that and you can just sort of scrape it a little bit, pulling some of the paint from the bottom into the top. And already it's getting more interesting there. Let's say I'm coming down to here. There we go. See what I'm doing? Just to make that edge a little bit more interesting. by painting, sometimes painting right up to the edge and sometimes not quite painting right up to the edge. And also giving a little variety of color to the edge. What I'm doing is keeping the character of the edge, the straightness, or I should say the straight nature of the edge, and giving it character, is that I'm now changing the color of the edge, introducing different colors. Here's a neat thing that I see all the time. At the edge of a roof will be, right on that straight edge will be different colors. Watch this. There it goes. Look at that little note of color right on the edge. So beautiful. And you can keep doing that. Now we're getting into color occurring right at the edge. I guess that's why I love old things that nature has altered. Nature in the form of weather and simple aging. See, that's why I'm getting better and more handsome with age, is that nature is giving me character and making me more interesting to look at. Smarter too. Now we can play with the top of that roof too now. Supposing we have, let's say we have some sky showing right up in here. Ooh. And let's say we have a dark tree behind it over here, coming up like that. Let's say one of those wonderful white pine trees behind it. Okay, and then we want to get a nice roof against that skyline there. Again, we can either turn to the knife and start creating a roof line. Start introducing more colors. And of course, when you're actually out in the field working on this, you want to use the colors that are actually out there. I'm just making this up right now, but this is exactly what I would do if I was out there. In a way, it's more difficult, but in another way, it's easier because I'm inventing it. And I'm able to invent it because I have sought out and painted subjects like this for a long time. See? I want to create some of my straight edges with a brush. Brushes, you really can control things better with the brush. But you can't always get some of the wonderful effects that you can get with a knife. The way I'm putting the paint on with the knife or the brush is exactly the way I would put it on in the field, at this same speed, holding the brush the same way, mixing my colors in the same way, placing them on, the way I hold the knife. It's all the same as if I were outdoors. Now see how interesting these lines are, even at this stage. Let's say I want to make this roof line a little more crisp. Go to one of these knives and mix up the color. And let's say I want to get a nice green edge on there. Since we're in a sort of green harmony here, let's stay within it and not confuse ourselves. Oh, that's a nice color. Let's see, we have I know that I don't want to do the whole edge of the roof. I just want that little bit, see? So I have that little bit right on the edge, and I know where that's going to go, see? So I'm going to put it right there. Let's see if we can't pull this off. Oh, I can just see it. There it is. Now, look at that accent. Isn't that gorgeous? I could never get that effect with a brush. It's just too perfect, too smooth, too sharp. So edges, straight lines, and how to put the paint on. Let me do a couple more edges. Let's say we're looking out over the ocean, and here's this little sugar house or something, and it has a window here. And let's say it has a little dip in the roof there, so we get a double edge on the roof. You know, it's getting more and more interesting already. Let's say it has a little doorway here too. See? Okay. Creating these little edges, and the doorway has a little window in it. Okay. And we need to suggest this, the frame of the doorway going up, and it has to be the same color. There we are. All these are straight lines that I'm creating, and yet these little straight lines are fascinating because each one is being put on in a different way. Let's say we got a straight line for the edge of the building, and that maybe the farmer or whoever painted the edge of this building a lighter color. Things like this on the edge of the building, going up and down. Whoops. Always know what's on the edge, right? Right. Look before you leap. Make variety. There we are. Now we come back and we redo the roof above it and create that edge. To make it, when you're creating an edge, to make the edge even more interesting is don't mix the paint too thoroughly, so that even before you place the paint on the canvas, that there's a lot of variety in the paint. It's not completely mixed so that you have a flat tone. The tone is, so to speak, almost impressionistic before you apply it to the canvas. See what'll happen. Oh, now, isn't that great? There's always some element of accident when you're painting. Even the most controlled painting has some of that. And so little accidents happen, but there is also an enormous amount of control. And the more we know about what we're doing, and the more we study what truly great painters have done with oil paint, the better off we are. Greater our vocabulary will be when we sit down to speak through our paintings. The more eloquent we will always be. So that's all I'm going to do today, and I want to thank you for joining me, and I hope that you've had a good experience watching me work. And before we end, I'd like to leave you with a few of the paintings that I've done in the past, and you can watch these as we say goodbye until the next time. And I wish you much joy in your work.